Derval Publications presents an author interview with Nancy Morrison, author of Benched, Passion for Law Reform. As a judge, Nancy Morrison served 9 years on the British Columbia Provincial Criminal Court and 15 years on the Supreme Court of British Columbia.
Well, it's a book I've been writing for about 50 years. Someone said, "How long has it taken you to write the book?" And I have to admit, it took about 50 years. When I first started practicing law, things would happen and I would go home and write about it. I didn't keep a diary as such, but I kept a folder that over the years I've called scribblings, and things that astounded me, upset me, some delighted, but mostly upset. And I kept thinking I have to write about this someday, because I don't think people are aware that all of this is happening, and that was particularly with regard to women's rights when I started practicing in 1963. So over the years, that file called Scribblings kept growing. But I've written a book that, as a sitting judge, I could not have written. I had to wait until I retired, and I kept looking forward to finally sitting down and pulling all the material together that I had been writing about. And the material grew and grew. It's in a book called Benched, and the subtitle is Passion for Law Reform. And I didn't realize how much concentration there had been in the material I had been writing over the years that really was advocating law reform. There's some fun stuff in the book too, I have to tell you. One of the things that is funny now, but it wasn't particularly funny at the time, was I couldn't get a job. I had a degree, political science BA, and I had a law degree. I had articled for 12 months and then had a 6-month bar admission course in Toronto after graduating, and nobody would hire me, and for the simple reason that I was a female. I could have gone back to Saskatchewan and got a job with my dad, but that kind of was admitting that nobody would have me. And so some of the people that I approached for a job, one of them was Charley Devon, who later became a Chief Justice in Ontario, who was a wonderful lawyer and a wonderful Chief Justice. And but when I went to see him for a job, he said no, I couldn't hire a female. And I said to him, well, I had hoped that he might think differently, because I knew his wife was a lawyer and that she worked with him in the law firm. And he looked at me as if I was, frankly, crazy, and very slowly and nastily said to me, "She just does research." So that was one job I didn't get. And there were a lot of other examples like that, which I have told the stories many, many times over the years in all the speeches that I've given on women's rights, and now they're funny, and I know I'm being a bit mean in naming names, but I think it's important that in some of those instances that we realize that we have come a bit of a way in the law profession. But still, if you look at the law profession today, not many senior partners and controlling partners in the big law firms are women. So the law reform came in every area, a lot of it in family law, a lot of it in criminal law. Family law in particular, because when I began practicing, there were so few women practicing law across the country. And women would seek out a woman lawyer because the things that were happening to them, domestic violence, all the problems with trying to get assets or maintenance if their husband left them, those just were not adequately dealt with in the law. The women were getting beat up by their husbands and then getting beat up by the law, quite frankly. And so I've said in my introduction to the book that I've always felt an obligation to those early women clients to put down what they went through and to hope that things are better. And things are better as far as equal assets for both husbands and wives now. Before everything was in the husband's name, and it stayed that way. Things are much better now. But the domestic violence scene has not improved, I don't think, anywhere in the world. There are horrific problems with domestic violence, and usually it's women and children. Sometimes it's men, but most often because of culture, because of religion, because of long-standing historical and religious reasons, it's women and children who are the victims. There was one woman, she was 45, very attractive, well-spoken, married with 4 children, and her husband came home one day and announced that he was going to leave her, that he'd fallen in love with his 25-year-old secretary, and he intended to marry her. And this was 1963. There were no rights for women unless they owned the property. Well, they'd been married for, I think, about 25 years, a little less. She had worked as a clerk before the marriage, but once they got married, she concentrated on being a wife and a mother and advancing his career, and he was successful. And they had a beautiful cottage and boats up in the Muskoka area. They had a lovely home in the Niagara area. They had 4 children, 2 in high school and 2 were in university just starting. She had no money in her own name. She had no assets in her own name. Everything, including the 2 cars, were in the husband's name. So she was entitled to nothing by way of assets. She was entitled to maintenance for herself and the 2 dependent children. But if she went with another man and slept with him even for one night, she would no longer be entitled to maintenance at that time. And I was truly shocked by what the law was dishing out to married women in those early years.
In addition to writing about politics and fascinating legal cases in the book, Nancy writes about her family and her life partner, actor and director Bruno Gerussi.
I first saw Bruno doing Romeo and Juliet at Stratford. When I was going to law school, we used to go to Stratford, and I confess I fell for him. He was a magnificent Romeo, and it was many years later that I finally met him. In the meantime, when I was in Saskatchewan, his radio program, Bruno revolutionized radio. He and his producer, Diana Filer, they had the 9 to 12 CBC radio cross-country radio slot. And for the first time, there was this incredible mix of politics and humor and recipes and politics, you name it. It was the most eclectic radio anywhere in North America. So I drove my car all over the prairies in the morning, going to court in various places like Esterhazy and Humboldt and Kamsack, listening to Bruno on the radio. And frankly, I used to fantasize I should write to him, and I should say I should be your Saskatchewan correspondent. When we finally did meet, he laughed when I told him, and he said, "Well, you should have." I said, "Yeah, well, I was too shy to do that." Judy LaMarche was here doing radio for about a year in 1972. And she phoned me one day and said, "Well, you always said you would give your left arm to meet Gerussi. He's invited me up for Thanksgiving up to Gibson's, where he was filming Beachcombers." And I told him I would come, but she said, I told him I was bringing a friend. And so that's how I met Bruno. And it was love, it was mutual, it was instant. And for 24 years, we traveled and golfed and laughed and read. He was a political junkie as bad as I am, and we enjoyed the same things, quite frankly. He was easy to live with, and fun and never dull.
Jack Batten, writer and journalist, says in the Toronto Star, Nancy Morrison writes about her experiences on the bench with uncommon candor, intelligence, and a welcome dose of humor. Benched is available in bookstores through indigo.ca and Amazon. Distributed by the University of Toronto Press.